Lately I find myself doing a lot of nice, beautiful things in my life. And I'm looking at it, and I already saw a few of your videos, like when you are in this stage that when you look at it, and I don't find myself like really enjoying it, what is happening. And I used to when I was younger, and maybe that has to do with the identity. I make a jump to that. I learned myself how to enjoy things. I kind of learned it, like after puberty, like, okay, I must start to enjoy. And I felt that there was a phase in my life I could really enjoy dancing and singing. I do it. And it's not that in the moment I'm enjoying it, but it's when I come out of out of, like when I sing bhakti or kirtan with the whole group, I enjoy it to the fullest. It comes from somewhere else, you know. But when I come out of that zone somehow, there is this identity question, like, is it really okay? Is this now? Is it the mind digs in? And I for a month or 3, I'm like, when I'm at home alone, I'm not enjoying much. But it's especially when I'm on my own, when that arises.
This also needs to be understood, I'd say, once and for all, that there is enjoyment and there is enjoyment. Or rather, there is enjoyment which has duration, and there is joy, pure joy. Enjoyment comes from the contact of the senses with the object of perception. That kind of enjoyment is obviously temporal, and it cannot provide a lasting joy, ever. This is known. And this is true to any kind of teachings, any kind of traditions. This is, by the way, belongs to the ABC. ABC, it belongs to the very, very fundamentals of how it functions. In fact, in that whole thing, it's like eating chocolate. It has that a trajectory. It lifts you up, right? Or coffee, like, you know, and then it inevitably drops you down. So all these kind of enjoyments that derive from doing something, because the contact of the senses with that what objects of perception provides is not only limited to the, let's say, seeing, smelling, touching, tasting, right? Hearing. Although that all provides great sense, if you have preferred sounds in the form of music, and you hear that, you enjoy that. You hear sound, chirping birds, you enjoy that. Whatever you enjoy. Someone enjoys rock opera, someone enjoys classical opera, someone enjoys, you know, whatever, country music. Someone derives enjoyment, but the track has the end, right? You cannot listen to your favorite singer all day long. It will become nauseating, I hope. You can hear it once, your favorite singer, maybe at the time, your favorite musician. You cannot have it 24, right? You cannot have it all the time. So this is a simple illustration of that duration aspect here. Same with anything, you know, when you haven't tasted strawberry for a while, and then in season, ripe, sweet, it's pure joy. But it has duration, and so forth, right? Then there can be joy from let's say, something which is not extended to the senses. Enjoyment from reading, enjoyment from conversation, hearing something being reflected back, conversing, relating. All this brings joy, right? Wearing a new pair of shoes, it's joy there. Even a new pair of socks, no matter how mundane, but if they're nice, mostly cotton, not beautiful, right? You wear them. It's a joy, no? Wearing a new item, come on. Right? Or out of the shop, and if you really like it, there's a joy to that. But that joy doesn't last. That moment you put it on and like, yeah, great, you got compliments, and then it wears off. It like, okay, yeah, fine, yeah, it's comfortable using it, yes, still good, great, but it doesn't have that crispy feeling about it. Every experience is like that, my dear. Everything without exception. Everything. Everything has honeymoon and then life. So this is that kind of, it belongs to these enjoyments. And there has to be clarity that there is also a certain clock-like energetic quality to it, or a trajectory, parabola-like in every experience that is enjoyable in the moment whilst we're doing it. It reaches a certain peak, and from there it only down. It wanes down. It's in the nature also of the nature. This is how the nature devised everything. You study Indian philosophy, you study some of the aspects, maybe other disciplines, I don't know. Wherever this is spoken, you will see why that is. There's difference between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock and 1:45, right? On the clock. And that difference is also colored. We earlier mentioned Ayurveda or Samkhya, right? The gunas, they're constantly in a state of permutation. You cannot remain in Sattva guna all the time. They change, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. You're aware of that? Are you aware of that? Because you've been around long enough to know these categories, right? So this is what these joys you talk about. You sing, you chant, you are with people, then you come home, you crash, and you don't have that joy. Because this joy is not real joy. These are reflective rays. They come through contact. No, very good, because that's the most important thing. See? If you understand that, you hang on a second, because if you understand that, that's the most important. Don't say just, I understand that, because if you understand that, this question will not rise. Any joy that arises from the contact, whatever the contact there is, that joy is not real joy. It's just a kind of a form of a temporal reconciliation. It's a kind of, have a sweetie as long as you're not crying. Just to stop you crying. The real thing here is joy. Joy, which is self-evident and independent from the contact. Independent from the contacts, any contacts. That joy needs to be sought after. This is the most important joy. When that joy is touched, all other joys are then pierced through that joy. So therefore, you can wear the same watch for 25 years and it will still give you as much joy as the day one you bought it. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm speaking out of experience. You will have joy arriving from the same things, because it is no longer linked to that what is experienced during this, or what is being experienced at the peak. That is the real joy. The joy which illumines all other joys. All these other joys are reflective rays of Ananda. Every object in the world is Ananda. Everything, all experience is here for the sake of Ananda. But Ananda needs to be experienced. Ananda, that is the substratum, irreducible substratum, Satchitananda. Everything is subject of coming and going. What remains is Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss. Everything comes and goes. This joy, that joy. Moreover, when your consciousness lives at the level of Satchitananda, even that what otherwise would be considered to be opposite of joy, opposite of enjoyment, a sense of melancholy, loneliness, even sorrow, will be filled with joy. Secret, dim joy beneath. And the most enjoyable time is when you are alone, because that's what this is really all about. You think that you are surrounded by people. It takes precedence, impresses you. But in reality, you are never, ever, other than by your own self. This is the understanding. There's nothing more precious than being alone, nothing more enjoyable. Everything pales in comparison. Everything is just a replica of that, how much enjoyment is when you are alone. Loneliness and solitude are two different things. Loneliness comes from confusion, misunderstanding, misperception. That loneliness, sense of loneliness, because we are disconnected. We cannot bear to be alone. Whereas solitude is a state of sovereignty. It always celebrates itself for its own sake. And the joy arrives not because of the contacts of this and that. It's causeless. That's what we aim at. We aim at the causeless joy. That's what Ananda is joy for no reason. There's nothing to celebrate, nothing to enjoy. There's nothing in our life that is happening that we should, yes, that's enjoyment. No. Nothing is happening. There's nothing. If, in fact, everything is opposite. Everything tells us that things just go against the grain of how we want it. And there's this joy, you cannot help it. And also, this is a reminder to all this. We make ourselves busy. That's the way of life. Of course, it's not to be at all. I'm not saying that this is as a limitation. We make ourselves busy so that we don't experience these moments of solitude now you speak of when you come home, and then, everything kind of crashes down. So what's the answer? What to do about it? Okay, fine. Maybe a little story. Just tell you a story. This story from Maharishi's, I think it's one of the books about Maharishi's first stay in the United States, in the Los Angeles, by Olsen family when he stayed there. So there was this gathering, and I think the gathering was actually in Hawaii, and it was retold. And there were some real classical encounters that came out. One of them is this woman says, Maharishi, why is it that I am, when I go out, when I'm with people, I'm a source of joy, and I'm a source of this celebration and everything, and everyone in my company, everyone I'm with, they're just like, ooh, how wonderful you are. I'm like shining and, and bringing so much fun and everything. But then when I come home, I feel miserable, I crash down, I completely feel alone and thwarted. What's going on, you see? Why is it that when I'm out and about, people love my company and everything? And Maharishi responded is that because this, what you're experiencing out there it's not derives from the real joy, which is the source of all joys. It's like putting up an attitude. And of course, back in those days, remember, it's an era as well, that era, where you have to kind of put up a smile on your face, right? You have to kind of happy-go-lucky kind of, well-doing. It's like everyone is smiling to sell you ketchup, smiling to sell you McDonald's, smiling to sell you car, smiling, because it's good for business. So you kind of go out with that attitude. Not that nothing wrong. Smile is wonderful, it's beautiful. But when it made into some kind of mask that one wears, then of course, soon as one is back into one's own domain, when one is alone and that one doesn't need to perform, what one left with is the reality of the situation. And the reality of situation, there are no smiles. You see? So this is a very timely reminder. I'm glad you brought it out into the open. So that you have this understanding, and this understanding is twofold, do you see? Understanding that all enjoyments derived from the contacts, whether these are contacts of organs with sense perception, right, objects of perception, or whether this is subtler level of contact at the level of mind or emotions, are subject to coming and going. They're transitory, therefore. They're spoken of as transitory. And they're bound to change. They have to change. They cannot stay the same. And to absolutely have clarity about the real state of affairs, that causeless joy is what your goal is. This is what you aim at. Well, if you are constantly running after joys, and if you are running in pursuit of enjoyment, then you do not have any possibility for connecting to that causeless joy, because that causeless joy is self-evident. It rises on its own if we simply give it a chance. When we give it a chance, it rises. When the mind is busy, often in spiritual discourses in various traditions, that the fluctuations, that mind is subjected to at the habitual level, at the level of obsession, is what robs us of bliss. Because as soon as we relax, there is this bliss. As soon as you relax, there's this bliss. If you relax enough, there's more of that bliss. But there is this tightness in the diaphragm, We don't allow ourselves to relax. We're holding it together. And that holding of it together contracts the experience of that bliss, because you're not allowing yourself the real joy. So therefore, then you must constantly repeat doing something which temporarily gives you the satisfaction. Not that anything, what you're doing is beautiful, don't get me wrong. Singing, chanting, sharing this time, it's beautiful. But if that's all there is, it's a poor man's supper. If all there is, then you are somewhere caught in a circle. It's another form of addiction. All addictions are linked to that. Lack of sugar. What is it, lack of sugar? Why is the sugar put in every product? Why sugar is a pandemic? Because it's a lack of sweetness in our life. Real, true sweetness. And then tongue becomes corrupted. When the tongue is corrupted, you put the sweetest date in the mouth, or real honey, and you can't enjoy it because it doesn't have these corrupted substances in that. It doesn't. It doesn't have anything that tries to seduce. It's straightforward. It can be refined, and in fact speaks myriad of ways. There's so many different honeys. But if you're addicted to sugar, only sugar would do. So the Ananda, bliss, is like that sweetness which there, it's the predisposition to begin with already. Because Satchitananda, it's that what is the substratum. Everything else is an added layer, frothing. And when it subsides only to that which is substratum. It cannot subside further. Therefore, Satchitananda is recognized across. These are the qualities of the permanent, unperishable. Being, consciousness, bliss. But there is no recipe of how to get there. Like, what do you do? What do I do? You have to discover that bliss, because it's not something that I have in store here and I'm going to distribute on a fourth day for those who were good in meditation. It's there at all times. You see? At all times. It's just you'd never have the chance to connect to that because you are taking over out of yourself always. We are, you are, I'm saying we are. There's this propensity. So be encouraged. Okay? Take some insights from this. And see how that causeless joy is there. It's not that difficult. Because it's not that something that you have to, no, it's always there. You see? Just as being is always there, that's all there is. Consciousness is always there, it's all there is. And so is bliss. Okay?